This morning, we speak matters food security. Should countries be focused more on food availability or building the food systems? What should come first? In studio, I do have Dr. Shem Kuya, right? Director at the Research and Innovation Center, JKUAT, and then Leonida Odongo, who is the founder at Nawiri. Haki Nawiri Africa. I'm confusing Haki and Africa, but thank you so much for staying with us. She spoke about some of the challenges that the country is facing, for instance, but when it comes to warning systems, you are a director of a research center, and this deals with the food systems in the country. We are not doing okay, all right, as far as securing our nation food-wise is concerned. So what is the place of research in the warning systems that we get? Because we know when the weatherman speaks, we should expect this. But in food or research on botany and food, for example, what is your role and what is the latest as you speak?
In terms of warnings, yes, we have those warnings. It's predictable that climate is changing. The temperatures, the rainfalls are unpredictable. What we're doing at JKUAT, so Research and Innovation provides a platform for research and coordinates lots of research at the university, and that cuts across within climate change, food, agriculture, engineering, biodiversity. Now, some of the things that we've seen very critical will be scaling up technologies that have been found to prove successful. For example, we're trying to look at the use of a technology called push-pull, where you're able to control pests, you're able to control weeds, and you're able to improve soil fertility using components of the systems and not necessarily with adding chemicals. So you have a situation where you mix plants, that is, you diversify the farming system, and parts of the component of the system are able to release chemicals that will repel insects that would have otherwise affected the maize crop, for example, stem borer, fall armyworm, but also other components, for example, napier grass, will be able to attract those insects away from the valuable crop. And so what we are doing is that this technology, which was founded by ISIPE, what JKUAT now we're coming in with partners, is to look at its applicability outside the scope of cereal production system. Can we now include this in vegetable production system? You realize that farms are small, and the farmers need to get all that they need from those farms. Can we integrate agroforestry? And if you're talking about agroforestry, which type of trees are we bringing on board? So that's one of the research that I'm personally involved in. But then there's a question that you asked about the coming El Nino and what should be done. In the immediate, people have to be safe and people have to find food. And so that's where the place of storage. Earlier on, she said people used to store their food. And then they moved from storing their food to selling to government and other agencies to store to them, but that has proved not to be successful. So there will be need for people to eat. But as we say, food security is a long-term approach. What the government should do, one, it has to increase efforts in rebuilding our soils. Rebuilding the soils has benefits, including making them resilient to drought so that the crop will be able to produce even when there is little water, but also stronger even when there is that El Nino or lots of rain and floods, the soil will not be washed away. Okay, especially when you include perennials. So those approaches are costly and require funding, will require lots of investment. So government should prioritize on that. I'm thinking of other safety nets which have to do with the growing, and that directly involve farmers, growing those plants that are likely to produce off-season, for example, trees, to act as a safety net. I'm thinking about government scaling up efforts to disseminate information, which plant should be grown where during this period. it will not make sense for farmers to go ahead. They've been told there is rainfall, go ahead and plant plants that cannot withstand floods.
Right.
For example, go ahead and plant beans during the seasons.
Yeah.
They would expect that there will be no harvest at all. So there should be targeting and siting of plants, and we expect this to be known and usable by the extension services. Yeah, I think other technologies that have been tried within JKUAT that are found very working is the water harvesting technologies. For example, during this El Nino, there is the aspect of doing planting pits. There's aspect of farm ponds where farmers can come together and dig ponds where they harvest water and now use them during the drought. So there's lots of research that has been found promising that can be upscaled. The role of government here will be now to help scale up and scale and scale out these.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that I'm thinking should be of priority is integrating into the extension system knowledge and information that has been gathered from all this research, because that information is there. Some of it is not documented, some of it is documented. Entities are doing their own parallel extension, but can we have a situation where all this is integrated? Some of these technologies, some of these innovations are integrated into the extension system, so that when the extension officers go out there, then they are able to pass this information and not necessarily wait for another entity to come and pass this information to the farmers.
And you know, what is the role of the government? Because we all always give an example with Israel, you know, a desert country, but it's big on agricultural production, okay? Like he's mentioned on improving the soil. And I want you to expound on when you talked about the fertilizer might not have been, for example, a good idea into ensuring that the country is food secure. What did you mean by that? And is there a way that Kenya could be where Israel is today? And what will it take?
Okay, one thing I want to point out is the fact that farmers are on their own. Many a times, it's actually like a family venture, and whether my crops don't grow or they wilt, nobody really cares about me. And that's why I say that government should be closer, because we can't talk about agriculture being the backbone of our economy when farmers are among the poorest and farmers are actually going hungry, which is a contradiction. What I want to say, as I said before, is the most important part of food production, even before you go to planting and all, is the soil. And that's why we really need, and I concur with Daktari, we really need to see how our soil becomes healthy. Why I'm saying that fertilizer is a challenge, a problem. One is that it's training farmers to an economic system where you must have money for your soil to, for you to produce food. If you talk to farmers, they'll tell you sina pesa. So where are they going to get this money to continuously being, even if it's subsidized, where are they going to get this money to continuously buy these fertilizers? I work with farmers. Some of them are they are very poor, you know, and so they have to juggle between, do I buy fertilizer or do I buy food or do I produce food for my family? And that's why now agroecology comes in. One is you use the locally available materials. You have twigs on your farm. You have trees that have fallen. You have barks on your farm. Those are the things that you use to bring back life to your soil. And you'll see, like, even if the soil you've been using chemical fertilizer for a long time, and you start using organic matter on your soil, you're going to see change. First of all, you're going to see that your soil is becoming softer. The next thing you're going to see is that you're going to see microorganisms coming back to your soil. The fertilizer are often toxic to the soil, and that's why they kill the living microbes in the soil. And if for example, these people who are marketing fertilizers, they come to you, they'll always tell you, keep on adding more and more. Nobody is going to tell you that this is going to have a toxic effect on your farm. And this is evidence from the farmers that we work with. They'll tell you what we normally do is that when you go to farming communities, you'll find that they are using fertilizers. And what we do is that we tell them, just set aside a portion of your land. Let's say, for example, the size of this room. Whatever you learn practically in terms of organic farming and, vermicomposting and all that, practice it on this small piece of land. And when we have the next session, before we do anything, they have to share. How was your soil? Did you make the compost? How is it? How is your soil now? What changes are you seeing? And the farmers are seeing that, they say that even the taste of the food, the food tastes better for them. And so that's why I'm saying that we need to look at something that restores back life in a holistic manner, not just looking at the yields, because what is the point of having a lot of yields for now? Because if you're using this synthetic material, you'll have a lot of yields at the start. But then what happens cumulatively after a long period? Your soil continues to lose the fertility, the land continues to lose the biodiversity, and of course you'll have to be pumping more and more synthetic materials on your land. And that's why for us we are pushing for agroecology. And I'd like to point out that this is not being anti-government. It's actually looking at the holistic health of our communities. And I can cite Murang'a County as one of the counties that has developed an agroecology policy and an agroecology act. And for them it's about coming up with healthy food, and when you talk about healthy food, you're talking about health from the soil until the end of it, and also looking at the value chain, because if you talk about organic food, it's normally expensive. But if more farmers can be able to adopt agroecology, this will bring the prices down and actually also address the issues of climate change.
And Daktari, from research, what you've said on what research says about food security and protection of our lands and soil, it's different from what the government is doing. Why is there a disconnect between what researchers, even from government institutions like JKUAT, are saying to when you look at what the government is doing, it's completely opposite?
I think the disconnect will be associated with not passing down communication flows. But then also for research we explore everything. So when you're researching, you don't necessarily target something that you know this will provide benefits. Research provides a platform for exploration. And some of the things that we find, that is now what we communicate. I'm thinking there's really not a disconnect per se between what government is doing and what we are doing. Once, for example, the fertilizer, I would accept it's not a long-term strategy to solving a food security situation.
The government has said it's a long-term strategy.
It's not a long-term strategy. It's not a long-term strategy to solving food security situation, because interactions, findings show that by using fertilizer, you increase yield for the first, second, and the yield will decline because of those effects. Okay, but I think it's an intervention that was put in place to boost yields. I'm thinking there are situations where there is no organic matter, okay? In that situation, you have to find a way of increasing productivity. You see, trees will not get phosphorus from the environment. Trees will get phosphorus from either input. Maize will not get phosphorus from the atmosphere. You only get carbon and nitrogen. So here the idea is they can bring those minerals, for example, from deep down the soil into their organic matter and use what she's saying. So there is a place of fertilizer, but then the best approach, as we say, is agroecological approach, because that ensures provision of ecosystem services. It ensures that the soil is able to produce sustainably. My look at things is in institutions aligning to government agenda, because there's no any other option. We have to align to government agenda, and this one we can do when we cross-communicate with government departments. And the other thing that government can do, for example, especially in the current situation, is mapping which areas are affected by which problems. For example, in places that are really prone for drought, what technologies need to be done there, and then trying to come up with a portfolio of technology for that place and upscaling those places. In these places which are likely to experience flooding, which are the technologies that have been developed that can be helpful to this, and then passing down these technologies to be upscaled. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and Leonida, we've all agreed that for a country to be, for example, food secure, we should not just be focusing on the availability of food, especially when there is hunger, people are dying and there's relief food, but building strong food systems. So what would you say that is the ideal way of achieving this?
The ideal way of achieving a sustainable food system, first of all, is to support farmers. Farmers are on their own. They have so many challenges in terms of capacity, in terms of credit. Farmers need to have money, for example. If, for instance, you need to take your farm produce to the market, you need money. You need, if you want to produce, you need money. You know, so supporting farmers, that will be an ideal, and this will also give them.
How?
Like, for instance, if I talk about agricultural extension service as a very practical thing, if you go to villages right now and ask them when was the last time they saw an agricultural officer come there, they'll tell you hata tumjui, isn't it? And so investing in agricultural extension, because the absence of agricultural extension service provision is what is making now these agrochemical companies to get into that vacuum and go and sell the chemicals to the farmers. And whatever they sell to the farmers are going to believe that as gospel truth. And so investing in capacity building, for example, on agroecology. Yes, we have civil society organizations are doing agroecology work, but then they need to be supported by government. For instance, in Machakos, I work with a group of 300 women. We have to fundraise in order to train all these 300 women. No donor is going to give you money to do agroecology training for 300 women at a go. And so these are some of the opportunities, because the government is the major duty bearer, and it assigned so many UN declaration and UN documents that relate to food, and so it ought to be the one supporting the civil society. And then another thing I'm also looking at is diversification, for example, would help. As, let's say, pastoralist communities, not just depending on livestock production, but also looking at how can we also produce food. It's not only important for the nutritional aspect, but it's also, we can use that as a source of income. We are doing agroecology training for indigenous people in Baringo, and also doing that also in a place called Loboi and Koibatek. And basically, we're also bringing farmers from other agroecological zones as part of exchange learning, so that you don't just are limited to your own community, but we are seeing that there's a lot of positivity when you take farmers to other areas. They learn from each other, and they're able to correct any mistakes that might be there.
Okay. And Dr., as we wind up, in a nutshell, how best should Kenya build sustainable food systems? How
best we should do that? I still look at rebuilding our soils, opening up markets, to plug in what is missing, providing support to farmers in terms of training, in terms of access to credit, in terms of infrastructure. I think if we deal with that, we'll be able to produce sufficient, sustainably, because our soils are able to produce. We'll be able to have what we are not able to in terms of buying the farmers, because also the other problem is when the farmers are poor, even if food is available, they cannot buy. And then they cannot even benefit from agriculture when there's price fluctuations. So I'll go for, we rebuild our soils using agroecological approaches. We provide support to farmers in terms of training, in terms of providing credits